Welcome everyone to the April panel hearing for the Mississippi Board of Nursing. And we always want to take just a few moments before we start the serious business that we'll be dealing with today for a moment of silence and prayer. So I'm going to ask Ms. Shirley Jackson if she would lead us.
Good morning, everyone. Would you please bow your head in prayer? Most gracious Father, thank you. Thank you for another beautiful day. Please guide us in the direction where we can understand what we're looking at this morning and what we're listening to, or who we're listening to. Let me apologize for saying it like that. God, make sure, and I know you will, that those that are coming before us will understand why they're here. Father, we're here to protect the public, and by your grace, we will do so. The public will know that the Mississippi Board of Nursing is doing all that they possibly can to make sure rules and regulations are followed to the letter. Dear God, once again, thank you for your guidance. Thank you for the staff at the Board of Nursing. Thank you for your creations. In Jesus' name, I do pray. Amen.
Thank you.
You're
We
welcome.
are ready to go on the record. And first, I'd like to make some introductions and tell those that we have several people joining us on our virtual session, and we welcome all of you. And we hope that if you have questions or comments for us, that you'll post those. And as we get time today, we'll try to respond to those. So let me tell you just a little bit about the board. It is comprised of 13 members. There are 7 RNs, 4 LPNs, 1 physician, and 1 consumer member. But today we are a 3-member panel of the board with one of us with each case will serve as an alternate. The alternate will not participate in either the deliberations or the decision concerning that particular case. So at this time, I'd like to ask the board members to introduce themselves. Start with my left.
Laura Moore, APRN.
Sandra Culpepper, LPN.
Shirley Jackson, LPN.
And I'm Mary Stewart. I am an RN member. I also want to introduce our representative from the Attorney General's office, the Honorable Ellen O'Neill, who will be our presiding officer today. And our staff attorney, Ms. Brett Thompson-May, who will be, thank you. What did you say? I kept saying visiting. No, she's not visiting. She actually lives here. She will be presenting the case, the first case that we have on the docket this morning. So we welcome her. And before I forget, we want to ask that if you have cell phones, if you'll make sure that those are silenced. And if you are participating, if you will make sure that you turn your mic on when you want to speak and then keep it off whenever you're not speaking. That would be very helpful. Am I missing anything? Okay. Great. So at this point, thank you, and I will turn it over to our hearing officer.
Good morning. Again, I'm Ellen O'Neill, and I will be, I'm an attorney from the Attorney General's office, and I will be presiding over the hearing from the standpoint of running it procedurally and making procedural decisions and questions, and answering any questions. So I understand today we have the case of Ms. Haley Lofton. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we are here in the case of Haley Lofton, license number R-878929. Ms. Lofton, is that you? Can you hear us?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Ms. Lofton, are you represented by an attorney today?
No, ma'am.
Okay, in that case, I just wanted to ask you a few questions for the record. You understand, Ms. Lofton, that you have a right to have an attorney here today?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you understand that the decision today by this board could have a negative impact on your license to practice nursing in Mississippi. Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and with that understanding, you are waiving your right to counsel and wish to proceed.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's great. And we will take care of you.
Okay.
not gonna let anybody take advantage of you. It's all fine. Way the
Thank
hearing,
you.
Ms. Lofton, the way a hearing works in brief, it's kind of like what you've seen on television, but a lot less formal. Is this a restoration? Okay, so she has the burden. Okay, Ms. Lofton, in this case, this is a request for reinstatement. Once we get you sworn in, we're going to let you go first. This is your opportunity to tell why you think the board should restore your license. And when you get through testifying, tell us everything, tell the board everything you want to tell them in any documents that you have. And when you get through with that, Ms. Thompson is going to be able to ask you some questions, all right?
Okay.
So do you have any witnesses?
No, ma'am.
Okay, just you. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and get you sworn in then. Can you raise your right hand? Let the court reporter swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this cause to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Brett, do y'all want to do an opening statement today?
We can,
You don't have
just briefly, but prior to that, the state would like to make a motion to admit exhibits.
Okay.
Exhibits B1 through B7 as state's exhibits, and then B8, of course, is a state exhibit, but it is the complete application for restoration submitted by Ms. Haley Lofton.
Okay, Ms. Lofton, what she's asked is she's got, Ms. Thompson has a whole bunch of documents on behalf of the state for the Board of Nursing that she wants to introduce as exhibits to your file, to your record here. Have you seen these documents?
Yes, ma'am. I have them right here.
Okay, you've looked through them, they look familiar to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do you have any objection to them being admitted into evidence?
No, ma'am.
Exhibits B1 through, what is it, B8, and then R1 are admitted into evidence, okay? Okay, and now, Ms. Thompson, if you'd like to give a brief summary of the case to the board. Thank you.
Sure. Good morning. This case today, it does involve Ms. Haley Lofton. Ms. Lofton is petitioning this board seeking restoration of her RN license. Ms. Lofton, her last activity with the Board of Nursing was when she signed a voluntary surrender on or about April of 2012. Ms. Lofton was in our recovery nurse program, perhaps not quite a year, and into her agreement with the recovery nurse program, there was a situation where Ms. Lofton, as the surrender shows, the evidence will show, was arrested requiring a controlled substance, hydrocodone, by fraud. That, as the evidence will show, has since been expunged. Ms. Lofton does carry the burden today, given the action that caused her to lose her license. She does carry the burden as to why this board should consider restoring it.
Well, with that, then, Ms. Lofton, this is now your opportunity to speak to the board and tell them why they should restore your license. So,
Okay. Sorry. Yes, ma'am. In 2011, I had a prescription for pain meds, and I just completely lost control. And I was definitely not in a, sorry, y'all. I was definitely not in a place to be practicing. And I was in the recovery program, and I did an intensive outpatient at Oak Arbor, and I completed it, and then I went and I relapsed, and sorry, and I called in prescriptions to Rite Aid and Vicksburg, and I was arrested. And I'm so thankful that that happened, because it was a turning point in my life. Hold on, y'all. Okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. And at that point, I was court ordered to be on probation. I pled guilty. I was court ordered. I was on probation, and I had to see an addiction doctor. Dr. John Mutziger followed me. And from 2013 to 2015, I didn't work. I stayed home with my kids. My husband went offshore, and I was on Suboxone, and Dr. Mutziger followed me. And I got in church, and got sober, other than the Suboxone, taking it like I was supposed to. And in 2015, I got off of probation and I got off of Suboxone. And my family, instead of trying to get my license back, my family went to Turkey, and we served overseas in the mission field with refugees and youth ministry in Ankara, Turkey. We lived there from 2015 to 2017. And when we came back in 2017, we became house parents at French Camp Academy. I don't know if you're familiar with French Camp Academy. It's a Christian home for at-risk kids, and we had teenage girls. And so from July of 2017 until May of 2020, that's what we did. In February of 2020, before all the COVID pandemic was in full whatever for it was declared a pandemic, we resigned from French Camp so that I could try to get my license back. Working, it's a 24/7 job, so going to AA and stuff, I didn't do that. I wasn't focused on that. I was focused on my job at the time. But in February of 2020, we resigned. We were going to finish through that school year, and then COVID hit and kids didn't come back. And so that's when I reached out to the board, ready to get my license back. And I am so thankful for getting in trouble when I did. And I'm so thankful that the Lord is gracious and has allowed me to serve him and be sober So I have 6 years, complete 6 years without even Suboxone of sobriety, 5.5 years of sobriety. And so we left French Camp, and I went and worked at a church in Raleigh, Mississippi, until I got hired at McGee General ER, where I've been since December, hoping to get my foot in the door somewhere so I could because I knew my hearing would be coming up. And so I've got a year of drug screens that are documented for y'all, and the meetings in Raleigh. There are no meetings in Raleigh. I've been doing step chat meetings, which was recommended when COVID first hit from somebody at the board. I'm not even sure who I spoke with. And I fully believe that I'm ready to nurse again. I know that the Lord created me to serve, and there's nothing in the world I love more than nursing. And I really screwed it up a decade ago, and I'm very thankful that the Lord has given me the opportunity to be here today.
Ms. Lofton, Ms. Thompson would like to ask you some questions.
Okay.
Good morning, Ms. Lofton. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to ask you some questions that are going to come from the exhibits that you have, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Let's first look at Exhibit B5. Would you agree with me that Exhibit B5 contains the voluntary surrender that you executed on April 16, 2012?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that document, Ms. Lofton, you did admit to the prescription by fraud criminal act within that surrender, as you just testified, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And in this surrender, paragraph 8 specifically, you also signed this agreement agreeing that you would submit a year of sobriety should you request restoration of your license. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is it your testimony today that you've provided that for the board's review?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And in fact, I believe that requirement is also in paragraph 9, discussing your 1-year eligibility to ask the board for restoration as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. And so as it relates to your prescription by fraud criminal act, you have supplied this board with information that has since been expunged. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And in fact, that document is located in your application, B8. And I believe it's under, you tabbed this, under final order and legal documentation, at the very end of B8. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And it does read in the Circuit Court of Warren County, cause number 12,0109-CRP, order expunging criminal records, and it lists your name. Would you agree with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. And the charges that are expunged based upon this order were 2 counts of prescription forgery, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is it your testimony today that since these charges that were charged against you for prescription forgery, is it your testimony today that there have since been 0 criminal acts on your behalf?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. The surrender alleged that the drug that you called in for fraud was hydrocodone. Would you agree with
Yes.
me?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that your drug of choice?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And before we get to some more questions on your application, I do need to ask you what your sobriety date is.
December 15th, 2015 is when we moved overseas, and I quit taking my Suboxone in December. I don't know the exact, December 2015 is when I quit taking Suboxone.
Okay. And you testified earlier that you were attending step chat meetings. Did I mispronounce that?
No, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. How often do you attend those?
At least 3 times a week.
Okay. And that is in Raleigh, where you currently reside?
It's online.
Got it. Okay. Are you utilizing the GPS mechanism through Spectrum Affinity to join those meetings?
I am logging them on to the Spectrum Affinity app, but I don't know how to do GPS because it's an online meeting. So I'm manually entering them. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. And is it your testimony that you have a strong support system?
Very. Yes, ma'am.
Who would that include?
My coworkers. One of the physicians I work with is also in recovery. His sobriety date was 2016. So his name is Trip Gillespie. Then I have my parents and my children and my church family.
Are you currently taking any medications?
No, ma'am.
Do you have a primary physician that you see regularly or nurse practitioner that you see on an annual basis?
On an annual basis, I see Christopher Wiggs.
Okay. Okay. Let's now go then, Ms. Lofton, to your Exhibit B8, the application for restoration.
Yes, ma'am.
Specific to this application, we're going to walk through this, and the part where it asks a bunch of questions, I believe it's part B. I want to focus upon number 9. You answered yes to number 9. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that question asks you, have you received counseling or treatment concerned with the revocation or surrender of your license? And
Yes,
then it
ma'am.
asks for you to explain and attach some records. So would you please explain your, and I know you did briefly in your testimony, but would you provide some detail about your treatment and where you went and what you did?
Yes, ma'am. Initially in 2011, when I got in trouble at Wesley Medical Center, I went to COPAC in Brandon. I just did a 2-week, assessment. And they recommended that I do an intensive outpatient. And so I went to Oak Arbor, went to intensive outpatient at Oak Arbor in Hattiesburg in fall of 2011. And, but it was after that I relapsed. I relapsed in 2012, at the beginning of 2012. And after I relapsed, I got arrested and got put on probation. And then I went to Dr. John Mutzeiger, and he followed me for 2 years from 2013 to 2015 on Suboxone therapy and drug tests. But other than that, that's all the treatment I've had.
When you were arrested and put on probation, were you required to drug test during that time?
Yes, ma'am, to random drug screens. I don't know that they ever drug tested me, but I had to sign that I would do random drug screens.
Okay. So your testimony then, when you state that Dr. Mutzeiger followed you, it was through the drug tests that he provided, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And that was from 2013 through 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And your testimony is you stopped using Suboxone on or about December of 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I attempted to get records from Dr. Mutzeiger, but he is retired. I got my drug screen records, but I tried to get a letter from him as I was doing the application, and the office said that he has retired.
Have you ever received a diagnosis, Ms. Lofton, of having a substance use disorder?
The 2 weeks I did at Copac, I believe I did.
Okay. All right. And since that time, is it your testimony, again, I'm trying to make sure I'm clear here, that what you're doing now to maintain your sobriety is that you're going to 3 meetings a week, is that correct?
A minimum, yes, ma'am.
And that you have provided the board a recent drug test, hair test, correct?
Yes, ma'am, I did hair test. When COVID first started, I had a hair test that covered from March to June, and then we had COVID in July. So I did a hair test to cover July through September, and now I do them through Spectrum.
Okay. So you have submitted urine drug screens, right?
Yes, ma'am. I check in every day through the program.
And you've supplied those results for your application as well, correct?
Yes, ma'am. And I've had one since I sent my application in. So there's an additional one as well.
Okay. And we'll look at those here in a bit, but I just wanted for the record purposes to make sure we are all clear about what you're currently doing to substantiate your sobriety. Okay. So you are not seeing any type of counselor or anything like that, right?
Just my pastor.
Okay. All right. Part, and I can't read, I think it's part C, talks about continuing education. You've been out of nursing for quite some time.
Yes,
Ms.
ma'am.
Lofton. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so, should the board entertain the notion that they should allow you to have a license, you do understand that they would need you to go and take a refresher course and perhaps other courses depending upon how you testify today and what you've provided them. Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is it your testimony you'd be willing to do anything the board asks of you beyond even continuing education? Certainly monitoring?
Anything, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Well, then in part C, would you just give a brief overview then of some of the things that you have attended or completed that you have supplied the board for their review?
Yes, ma'am. I started in 2017 when we were overseas, and I was, we were moving back, and I knew I wanted to work on getting my license back. I got some CEUs. I have, I'm not sure the total amount of hours of CEUs, but from 2017 to 2020, I have multiple, and that's in the continuing education tab, multiple CEUs that I completed. And then I currently am working in the emergency room also. So I'm reorienting that way as well. But I've always tried to stay as up to date as I can without being in practice during all that time. While I was at French camp, there is no nurse there, and I definitely didn't practice nursing, but you do a lot of mama to a whole bunch of children. So there's never been a shortage of caretaking, but I certainly am willing to do whatever is necessary.
Okay. So when you submit for the board that you are currently working at McGee General Hospital as an emergency room technician, what are some of your duties?
EKGs, phlebotomy, heights, weights, collecting lab specimens, taking urine to the lab, bringing patients back to the room, cleaning rooms, assisting the physician or the nurses with anything, wrapping, or splinting sprains or breaks or anything they need, stocking rooms.
And should the
Stocking
board,
IV,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying stocking IV trays, stocking rooms.
So if the board again should restore your license, would you continue employment with McGee General Hospital? Potentially?
Potentially, yes, ma'am. McGee General has offered me a position either in the emergency room or on the floor, depending on what the board, if the board would allow. But I also have a friend that's a nurse practitioner who also went through the recovery program before she was a nurse practitioner in McGee. Her name's Kelsa Temple Shirley, and she has also offered me the RN position at her clinic in the event that the board restores my license.
And just so you know, the board could, because they do have that authority, to prohibit some areas of practice should they restore your license, maybe within, a couple of years or whatever they deem is appropriate. And so you do understand that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. And you do understand that by doing that, again, you've been out of nursing for almost 10 years, right?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
All right. All right, back to your application. So you, I believe this is now going to be, the letters aren't clear here. Let me see. In part D, it talks about community service, and you testified earlier that you have been involved in many church-related and missionary projects, outreach for your community. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so is there anything else that you failed to testify to that you want the board to know regarding your community service?
No, ma'am. I mean, when we were overseas, we did refugee ministry and feeding the refugees and clothing the refugees and going to their homes and to the gypsies' homes. But other than that, no, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Okay. Part E talks about licensure status. That portion is blank because you only had a license in Mississippi. Is that correct?
Right.
For nursing, and you had no license for any other profession. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Let's talk now about your employment history.
Okay.
Just for the record, I think we've established this, but the last time you worked as a nurse was when and where?
Wesley Medical Center, June of 2011.
Okay.
June or July. I'm not sure. I think it was June.
Okay. And you've submitted here for the board your employment, and I believe you testified earlier, you have been gainfully employed pretty much since the revocation, or excuse me, surrender of your license. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am, with the exception of 2013 to 2015.
Sure.
I did a temp position, but I mostly stayed home with my kids and my husband went offshore.
All right. Part G of your application, Ms. Lofton, asks about professional rehabilitation. Certainly in light of the Criminal Act, which I know since has been expunged, the panel needs some assurance that, the involvement, criminal activity of a controlled substance that was abused by you, admitted to be abused by you, won't happen again. How can you assure this board that you won't go down that path again?
I think it's important that I took time off and didn't jump back into nursing immediately because I knew that I was sick. I knew that I was not ready to go back. I knew that I needed to work on me if I ever wanted the opportunity to nurse again. And I just feel like I have given my life to the Lord and have tried really hard to serve Him and not be self-serving. So I don't believe I'll ever do that again. I'm willing to do whatever I have to do. But I've been sober and have been serving the Lord for several years now. And I really, I can only speak for myself. I can only say what
Yeah. You're currently working in a very stressful environment with the ER. Would you agree with me?
Yes, ma'am.
What are your hours?
7A to 7P.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking that is, how are you holding up in those hours in that setting? Because adding nursing to that is can be stressful.
I feel like the Lord created me to do this kind of work. I'm very thankful to be back there. I love taking care of patients. I love my patients. I feel like I thrive in that environment. I definitely screwed up, but I feel like I thrive in that environment. I love the 12-hour shifts. I love taking care of people.
And so I guess, and I know we'll continue with your application, but I guess just out of curiosity, since you are working in a high stress environment, have you found any temptation for taking a controlled substance or needing
No, ma'am.
something?
No, ma'am. And I really have, even though it's not been nursing, I really have been in high stress employment for the past 6 years, working overseas in a not a war-torn country, but an Israeli state that borders war-torn countries full of refugees, and then at French Camp Academy raising other people's children with up to 16 teenage girls living with us at a time. I feel like I definitely have been in high. I feel like those are higher stress environments than the emergency room even.
Okay. All right. Part H on your application asks that you submit affidavits on your behalf, and that at least 3 of those affidavits be nurses in good standing. You've done that, have you not?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And of these affiants that you list here, do all of them have the understanding of how or why you lost your license?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. And I'm assuming then that they know you're here today.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Does your current employer know you're here today?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Those supporting affidavits are part of your application for the board to review. Is that correct, Ms. Lofton?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Let's now look at your treatment records that's contained in your application.
Okay.
And I believe you submitted some records from Decatur Family Medical. Is that
Yes,
accurate?
I did. I just submitted my drug screen since I couldn't get a letter from Dr. Mutzeiger.
Okay. And can you just roughly give us the range here of dates? You don't have to explain every single sheet of paper, but can you give us an understanding of what this is that the board's looking at?
Yes,
Just
ma'am.
generally?
When I was on Suboxone, because as part of my court order, when I called in those prescriptions, forged those prescriptions, I had to see a addiction doctor, and Dr. Mutzeiger is one that accepted me. So from 2013 to 2015, I had to see him. Initially it was monthly, and then I believe every 2 months. I may have gone to every 3 months. I'm not sure, but I had to submit AA documentation to him, like the AA calendars from the board. He accepted those, and then I had to have drug screens showing that the only thing I was positive for was the Suboxone. And so that's what you have in front of you.
Okay. I believe you put these drug screens in a sequence, so that's logical. I believe you start with 2013 and you end with like September of 2015. Is that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you've got the time frame with Mr. Mutzeiger, or Dr. Mutzeiger, from 2013 to 2015 for the board to review.
Yes,
Correct?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
In your testimony, as the only substance to which you were positive for was the Suboxone that was prescribed by Dr. Mutzeiger, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. We have already testified and gone over your continuing education. The next portion of your application that you list here on your tab states documentation of sobriety, and it contains some drug screens and some calendars. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So the first page behind that tab is a hair follicle test collected on June 23rd, 2020. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And what were the results of that test?
Everything was negative. That should be it's 90 day. And it was the most extensive test that they run for the hair, and everything is negative.
Okay. And just for the record purposes, you did not adulterate your hair or anything like that to cause a false negative, did you?
No, no, ma'am.
Okay, all right. All right. If we were to drug screen you today, what would you test? How would you test?
Negative for everything.
Page 3, behind your tab of documentation of sobriety, are just, I believe, 5 tests that you concluded here with Spectrum. These are your urine drug screens, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you were randomly selected during that time, and is it your testimony that these tests are your specimens and that the results are all negative?
Yes.
Okay. You include also for the board's review, your AA, NA calendars.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, how many did you include, or just give us a range?
12 months, well, 11 months, April through, well, I have the March one too, but it's not an application because I submitted it. It's in there. I submitted it in February. So they begin in April of 2020. And then I currently have the ones through today, but these go from April of 2020 till now, or till March of 2021.
Yeah, because I only see one meeting for March that's listed on your
Which-
March.
Right, which would be when I submitted my application, is the only reason why.
So then is it your testimony that you have been consistently attending 3 meetings a week?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is it your testimony that should the board request that you continue to do so, that you would complete that requirement?
Yes.
Okay. So in addition to information contained in your application, you have for the board's review, letters of recommendation that you have attached to your application. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You want to briefly tell the board who has written a recommendation on your behalf?
Yes, ma'am. These letters of recommendation go from 2017 to currently, just to kind of backdate my sobriety and the life I've been living, not just right now as I'm in front of the board, but over the past several years. And specifically, 15 through 17, when I was not being followed by an addiction specialist, and when I was overseas, or when I was in ministry, because I didn't have any documentation other than this. So if we want to start in 2017, we go to the last letter, which will be from Lori Vaughn. She's not there anymore. She was the secondary assistant principal at Oasis International School, which is where we worked when we were in Turkey. I worked as an admin assistant, and then the Band-Aid put her on her, basically. So that's from Lori Vaughn. And the one in front of that one is from Brenda Morton. She was my direct supervisor. She was the elementary school principal, and I worked mainly with the elementary kids. That was also at Oasis International School in Ankara, Turkey. And then Brother Ken Rhodes is the letter in front of that, dated July 31st, 2017. Brother Ken is the one who, he was aware of my troubles, my legal troubles, and he knew that I wanted to serve, and my husband wanted to serve. And so when we had to wait till I got off of probation, get my records expunged so I could go overseas. Brother Ken worked very closely with us in getting us assigned to Turkey to work. And then he also worked with us closely as we moved back and continued ministry in the States. And the letter in front of that is from Cindy McIntyre. She's actually resigned in the last month at McGee General. She was the ER director and had been there since like 2001. The interim director there now is one of the nurses I work with, but Cindy was the director when she wrote this letter.
One question about your letters that just note, Ms. Lofton, the letter from Ms. Lori Vaughn, it does state that you worked as a school nurse. Was that?
Well, I was not just, like I said, I was kind of the Band-Aid putter on her. There was no qualification that had to be, just because of my training. I was I was the one that the kids went to if they fail or parents needed to be called. But I also worked as admin assistant, looking over the school manual, making sure I had to do a bloodborne pathogen and immunization stuff. I had to, I guess, just because of the education and my experience. So I was the one that put all that stuff together. I also worked alongside another lady who had the title of she had the actual title of school nurse, but she also had just worked as a nurse years before. We had kids from 66 different countries in the world and different immunizations. And so we were just there as a communication between parents and students, and there when there were injuries.
Sure, but you can understand, at least from the board's perspective, we want to make sure that you weren't holding yourself out to be a nurse when you did not have a nursing license.
No, ma'am.
Okay, so it's your testimony that you were not holding yourself out as a nurse during this time?
I mean, I was considered one of the school nurses, but there was no requirement to have a license or anything of the sort. I was there doing ministry, and they asked if I would come in there and be the one to sit in that office. I don't really, to be a caregiver to the students on the elementary hall. I'm not really sure how that technically is.
So you didn't have to supply, and I'm sorry to go down this line of questioning. I think the board needs some clarification. When you were part of this team that went to Turkey, you didn't have to submit any documentation showing that you were a nurse or a license or anything like that. Okay.
No, ma'am.
On your application, did you disclose that you were in a health care related field, or how did they know that you were a nurse?
When we went over there, we didn't actually go over there to work at that school. My husband is a football coach and a teacher, and we went over there on the sports platform, and we were homeschooling our kids. And when we went, the church we went to, we didn't know about the school until we got there. The church we went to, the director of the school, the headmaster of the school, went to the church with us, and they asked my husband if he would come and teach, and they like to hire married couples, and since he was going to teach there, they were going to let our kids go for free to the international school if I worked there as well. And so that's just the position they put me in. I didn't apply for a school nurse position under the umbrella of I have a current license, I'm an RN.
Okay.
They said they needed help with bookkeeping, and they needed somebody to sit in the office for when the kids were sick, and they knew I had a medical background.
Okay. As we wrap up, Ms. Lofton, you were originally licensed by the Mississippi Board of Nursing on February 12, 2008. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so were you in active addiction the whole time you had a license, or can you explain at what period you were?
Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am, I was not in active addiction the entire time. I was, it's a shame to say, but I was pregnant in 2011, and I had a TERP patient that was paraplegic at Wesley. And when I came back from lunch one day, the guy, and I had back surgery when I was 15. So I had a previous back injury from when I was a child. But I had a TERP patient that was a paraplegic, and I came back from lunch, and he was laying in feces. Nobody had changed him because his nurse was at lunch. And so I went in there to change him and was not using proper body mechanics. I pulled him and I strained my back. And so my OBGYN couldn't do an MRI, did physical therapy, and was given hydrocodone until the end of my pregnancy. And I just lost control. I mean, I just lost control with the hydrocodone. At that point, it was quick too. I mean, I was pregnant in 2011. I was pregnant when I got in trouble at work. My baby was born in September. And so over a period of 2 months, maybe, I went from not taking prescription medication to being like in full-fledged addiction.
Okay. All right. And I'm glad you're bringing up the hydrocodone, because on your pharmacy profile that's been admitted into evidence, Exhibit B7,
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And the range of by which this report was run, if you look with me at the upper right-hand corner where it says date range,
Yes, ma'am.
would you agree with me? It states April 6, 2018 through April 6, 2021.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Would you agree also with me that what appears to be on this report are 3 prescriptions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you explain these prescriptions?
Yes, ma'am. 2012, December 14th, 2019, there's a prescription for pseudoephedrine ER. I just had a sinus infection at that point, I believe. The Hydromet syrup from 2018. I had pneumonia. I was diagnosed in Vicksburg with pneumonia. I was given Tessalon pearls and had an allergic reaction, broke out in hives all over my body, and he gave me a prescription for Hydromet. And then October of 2018, I had a total hysterectomy. It was my 6th or 5th surgery for my uterus and ovaries. I had endometriosis real bad. And so that prescription was post-hysterectomy. Miss Farah, this is Haley Lofton. I was in the middle of my hearing and it's gone. It still says it's live, but it's not working. Okay, thank you. Uh-huh. Okay. Oh gosh. Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yes, ma'am. I'm gonna just sit here. Okay, thank you. All right, bye-bye. Hello? Yes, ma'am. Okay, so N didn't go back to it?